Hi, in this video we'll see how to create a Azure virtual machine from the resource manager portal. So first thing what we need to do is we need a virtual network to put our computer. So first we'll create a virtual network. So go to networking option here and select create virtual network. Okay, let's give a name for our network. I'll call it HYD office, and we need to mention the address space, that is how many computers it would have as part of that network. So basically if I take this denominator as 24, it will be around 256 computers within this range, that is from 10.0.0.0 to 10.00.255, that is around 256 computers. So yeah, I'll go with this. I think for one VM this network size is good enough. So I'll enter other details like the resource group, and I'll select the location. So this is the first step. So we are going to create a network. Okay, so while my network is being created, I'll go to the marketplace and I'll select a image for my VM. So go to compute and select any one of these images. So let's go with the Windows Server image. Go say create, and enter some details like your computer name, what would you like to name your computer, then enter user ID. So this will be the login ID for that VM. Alright, enter a password, then select the resource group, and of course the location, and click OK. Now the next step is we need to pick a hardware template, that is the hardware resources like your processor and RAM for this VM. So there are many templates that are available, so depending on the requirement you may go with one. So I'm selecting the first one, DS1V2 template. Okay, so the next step is to select the network and storage. So I created a network HYD office. So by default, since we are in the same resource group, it picked up HYD office, and this computer will be part of that network. And storage account, like we've seen in the last video, it is used for storing the VHDs of this VM, that is the OS disk. Okay, and if you require to connect to this VM over a public route, that is over the internet, or if you want to RDP from your own computer to this cloud VM, then we need to have a public IP address as well. Okay. Okay, so this storage account is for storing the diagnostics information. Okay, so here is the summary of my VM. I'm naming it as test, and that is of this hardware template. It has one OS disk, it is part of the HYD office network, it will have one public IP, and it has diagnostics enabled. Okay, I'm going to click on OK, and this starts the deployment of the VM. So it's going to take a while, maybe around a couple of minutes, so we'll just wait for that. Okay, the deployment just succeeded. Just go to all resources now. Click on the name of the VM, And then yeah, this is the VM blade, and you can see several options for managing your VM, and you have a public IP address so that you can connect to it from your very own local computer. So now let's try to remote desktop into that computer. Okay, so I click on connect, and an RDP shortcut gets downloaded. Okay, I enter the same user ID password which I gave while creating the VM. Okay, so your first pass VM on Azure is ready for you. So this can be used for installing any software or making it you can install a an application, or you can make it a web server. So yeah, this behaves like just another computer on the cloud. So what we're going to do with it is, I'm going to enable IIS so that we'll try to use this as a web server. Okay, so I go to tools and I enable the IIS. Okay, so the IIS is being installed now, and another important thing that we need to do is we need to enable the HTTP port on the firewall. Now that we are going to use our VM as a web server, we need to create an inbound rule for port 80, because by default RDP rule is created on the firewall, and so we are able to RDP into the machine. So if we do not have a rule for HTTP, then we may not be able to use this as a web server. So I'm going to add an inbound rule for port 80, and I'm going to save it. So this should be done on the NSG, that is the firewall network security group. Okay, so this is done, and my IIS setup is also done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the public IP address and try to hit it like a web server. I'm trying to try to access from the web browser. Okay, simply type the IP address of the VM. Okay, so I have the welcome page of IIS. That means my local computer is able to access the VM as a web server. Okay, now let's get a user-friendly name instead of the IP address. So go to the IP configuration, the public IP configuration, click configuration option, and then enter a name for the VM. Okay, I've entered my web server 132. So let's see if we can access with this name. Okay, so I'm able to access with this fully qualified name, my web server 132.southeastasia.cloudapp.azure.com. So yeah, so our web server is ready, and you can deploy any web application or web API, and this VM becomes your web server. Alright, that's good. Now there are few more options that we need to be aware of. If you need to add additional disk on the VM, because by default there is only one drive, that is the C drive, and it's of 100 GB. Let's say if you need more capacity on the VM, this is definitely not the space you want to use, because it's a temporary disk and it will be gone when you reboot. So what you're going to do is, we'll go back to the portal. In the VMs we have an option called disks, so click on the disks option and add a data disk. Okay, now I'm going to, by default it shows me that I will create a, so I'm going to create a 512 GB disk, and we would need a storage container to store this disk. So I will create a new container in my same OS disk. I will name it as data. I'll say OK. So now once I save this configuration, a 512 GB dynamic disk is added to the VM. So since it's a dynamic disk, we don't have to reboot the VM for the changes to take effect. Okay, while this is being updated, let's just quickly look at what an availability set is for the VM. So availability set is one of the most important things when it comes to load balancing. So an availability set contains two things: fault domains and update domains. So fault domains gives you the protection against hardware failures. So you will have multiple sources of power and multiple sources of network for your VM. And update domains gives you protection against reboots during updates. So what happens is, if you have more than one VMs, and if you do not have an update domain or an availability set, it is possible that all the VMs may get rebooted at the same time, and there might be a downtime for your application. So to prevent that from happening, always create an availability set while you're creating the VM, and set the update domains to the required value. Let's say if you have 10 VMs, you may want to choose 5 update domains so that only 2 VMs will reboot at any given point of time. Okay, now let's go back to the VM and go to the disk management option. Okay, a new disk is found. Now let's create a partition and format it. So I'm formatting the partition, and once it is done, it should be available in the VM. So there we go, we have the 512 GB disk attached. So this is a permanent storage and this is a permanent storage, so you are good to store data in either of these drives, right? And at any given point of time, if you want to increase the size or capacity of the hardware, you can always go with this blade, that click on size and pick another one and say select, and the VM will do configuration by itself, and the new hardware becomes available. So we are basically doing a scaling up operation here. Okay, so there is one more option, reset password. This is useful if you happen to forget the admin password of the VM. Okay, and there's another option called redeploy. This is useful especially during the troubleshooting. Let's say sometimes you were not able to access to the VM, though it shows available and there is a public IP address. So if you click on redeploy, the host is destroyed and a new host is created. So physically the VM is moved from one server to another server in the data center. So the data is not lost, and the state of the machine is preserved. So yeah, so it will simply recreate the host and restart the machine. So this is useful when if the VM doesn't respond, or after a given point of time you are not able to access your VM. So you can try this option first before contacting Microsoft support. Okay, so that's the basics of the PaaS VM in Azure. So yeah, so you can always go back and refer to the slide which I shared, and you can find the documentation of virtual machines at this link. Thank you for your time.